Good morning from managed isolation in Auckland, New Zealand. As you can see, I'm currently in my hotel room where I'm spending 2 weeks. I have a lot of free time on my hands, and whilst I've been here, I've been spending a lot of time on social media, specifically Facebook. And something I've been seeing a lot is the Plandemic documentary. I haven't seen the full documentary, but I do believe at the start of it, it shows a lady called Judy Mikovits. She had a lot of interesting claims. And obviously I have a lot of free time on my hands, like I said, so I thought I'd do everyone a favor and do a fairly deep dive into who she is and her background and her claims. So without further ado, I present that to you. Alright, let's get into it. In 1980, Judy Mikovits graduated from the University of Virginia with a Bachelor of Science. In the 1980s, she worked at the National Cancer Institute working on studies of retroviruses. In 1992, she received a PhD in biochemistry. In 2005, in an effort to solve CFS, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, the Whitmore-Peterson Institute was created. In 2006, Judy became the research director of the Whitmore-Peterson Institute. Around that time, Judy attended a prostate cancer meeting near Lake Tahoe in Nevada. There she met Robert Silverman. He was a virologist, or is a virologist, at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. Robert Silverman co-discovered XMRV, which is a little-known mouse retrovirus. He was presenting research linking XMRV to deficiencies in a virus defense pathway. Judy recalled that she'd seen the same pathway weakened in CFS patients. So she got this great idea to look for XMRV in CFS patients. In Christmas 2008, Judy had her postdoc student look for XMRV in the white blood cells of their CFS patients. The first test they did only turned up 2 positive out of 20 CFS patients, but by tweaking the conditions of the test, they were able to have 20 out of 20. At this time, they kept the project under wraps, dubbing it Project X. She said that the secrecy was necessary because they also found XMRV in some healthy patients, raising concerns about blood products. She hoped to build an airtight case, and she was worried that skeptical public health officials would undermine her work. So, in 2004, she put out a research paper linking XMRV to CFS. In their research paper, they identified XMRV in 68 out of 101 patients, which was 67% of patients tested positive for XMRV, compared to only 8 out of 218 healthy patients. The BBC, NPR, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal all covered the research. So I'm just going to put these on screen, but essentially what happened is within a year, 3 studies came out attempting to find the same thing that Judy had with her research linking XMRV to CFS. So I'm not showing these in order of when they came out, but these came out around about the same time, January, February 2010, within a year. The conclusion of this study is that no association between XMRV infections and CFS was observed in the samples tested either by PCR or serological methodologies. PCR is the method that Judy used in her research paper. The next one said that this study failed to show the presence of XMRV in peripheral blood mononuclear cells of patients with chronic fatigue syndrome from a Dutch cohort. The study before was from a UK cohort. And then this study said that XMRV or MLV sequences were not amplified from DNA originating from CFS patients in the UK. It did, however, say that although we found no evidence that XMRV is associated with CFS in the UK, this may be a result of the population differences between North America and Europe. And this is actually what Judy said in response to these studies, that 1, they used different methodologies for finding the results, and 2, that they were using cohorts from different countries, which might have shown different results. Alright, so in summer 2010, a positive study came out finding similar results to what Judy had found. The study was done by the NIH's Clinical Center. The NIH identified a virus similar to the XMRV, not the XMRV, but one similar, in 32 or 37 people with CFS, and only found that virus in 3 of 44 healthy people. The NIH was preparing to release a study. However, the CDC was about to put out their own research paper with negative results. The authors of both papers delayed publication to assess any discrepancies between the two. So the study said that although we find evidence of a broader group of MLV-related viruses, which is the broader group of the XMRV virus, our results clearly support the central argument that MLV-related viruses are associated with CFS and are present in some blood donors. However, 4 recent studies have failed to confirm the PCR results reported. Those were the 3 I told you about, and the 4th one was the CDC study that also came out. They gave some reasons for the difference in disparity between all the studies. They said that there was some population issues, like I said before. However, they said that the CDC study, which is the one I'm going to get to in a second, the CDC study was using a cohort of Americans. So that argument is just out the window at that point. Going on to the CDC negative study, the CDC said that we did not find any evidence of infection with XMRV in our US study population of CFS patients or healthy controls by using multiple molecular and serologic assays. These data do not support an association with XMRV with CFS. Skip forward to Christmas 2010. Retrovirology, which is a science journal, published 4 papers that highlighted that contamination may be a possible explanation for the relation between XMRV and CFS. One of the articles said that mouse DNA contaminates an enzyme from a commercial kit commonly used for PCR, and PCR was the methodology Judy used in her original study. They did urge caution against over-extrapolating. They said that these papers do not say that contamination explains Judy's results. He just said that extreme care is required to avoid it. A little later, another virologist called Jay Levy, who was one of the first scientists to isolate HIV, released a study and said that they found no evidence of XMRV or other MLVs in the blood samples, and they had used the same cohort, so the same data that Judy had used in her study. They concluded that their results indicate that previous evidence linking XMRV to MLVs to CFS is likely attributable to laboratory contamination. So at this point, we now have 4 negative studies disproving, or not, at least not finding the results linking XMR to chronic fatigue syndrome, and we have 1 study linking a related virus to CFS. And then we also have 4 articles that have come out to say that contamination is likely the cause of the link between XMR and CFS. Despite all this, Judy was still undeterred. The Whitman Peterson Institute owned a company that was testing patients for XMRV, which cost up to $500, and Judy was encouraging patients that tested positive for XMRV to talk to their doctors about getting an antiretroviral drug normally used for those with HIV. So at this point, there's obviously a lot of confusion around whether or not there is a link. Around that time, the US National Institute of Health decides to fund a study to the tune of $2.3 million to actually figure out if there is in fact a link between the two. Dr. Ian Lipkins carries out the study. He uses 3 laboratories, 2 of which laboratories were used by Judy in her original findings. This study concluded that we did not find any genetic sequences of XMRV or related viruses in the people with CFS or the controls. As far as we know, there is no human being that is infected with XMRV. After the major study came out finding that there was no link and that it likely didn't exist in humans, Mikovits acknowledged that XMRV may not be behind the syndrome, but says that another related virus is likely responsible. Around this time, tensions were heating up between Judy and the institute that she worked for, WPI. Whitmore, one of the founders of WPI, said that she had ordered Mikovits to allow another researcher in the lab to work on a particular cell line, but Mikovits refused. Whitmore said that your actions have shown a complete lack of respect for your colleague and for my authority. She was then fired. Okay, it gets very crazy here, and the details are a little weird, so I'm just going to give a rough timeline of what happened. So, 29th of September, Judy's fired. According to an affidavit, which came out later in November, and this is according to Max Post, who was a scientist in her lab, who was the first to detect traces of XMRV in CFS patients. He said that she said she had had enough of WPI and WPI would go down. That evening, she rented a car and drove to Southern California, where she and her husband have a home. Max Post declined to comment on the case, but according to his affidavit, Judy gave him the keys to her office at a bar on the evening of the 29th and instructed him to retrieve laboratory notes and biological samples. Early the next morning, Post took 12 to 20 notebooks from a locked desk in Judy's office. On the 30th of September, the missing notebooks were reported to the police by WPI. According to a representative for the Institute, they claimed they were the property of the Institute. It reported them missing to campus police. Around that time, another worker in Mikovits' lab told lawyers in their signed affidavit, which was posted later, that after being fired, Judy asked her to ship cell lines of blood samples from the laboratory to Frank Rischetti, a collaborator and former mentor to Judy Mikovits. They both worked at the US National Cancer Institute in Frederick, Maryland. She did not send the samples. Post 2 refused a request to send additional lab items to Rischetti. Rischetti has declined to comment, and there is no indication that he was aware of these events. 17th of October, Judy Mikovits picked up the notebooks from Max Post before returning to California. 4th of November 2011, WPI files a civil lawsuit against Judy Mikovits. They are seeking return of notebooks as well as a computer and flash drives that Mikovits used to store lab data and patient records. The Institute obtained a restraining order preventing Mikovits from destroying, altering, or disseminating any of the information contained in the materials. 18th of November, Judy's arrested in California on felony charges that she is a fugitive from justice. She's held at a jail in Santa Paula without bail. One of Judy's attorneys says that her client is being held for extradition to Reno, Nevada in relation to a civil lawsuit against her filed by WPI. So later on, Judy says that she didn't see the documents. WPI says she did. Eventually, the charges are dropped due to other legal proceedings against one of the WPI founders on charges of, I believe, tax evasion. Regardless, this whole thing seems to be about whether or not she stole notebooks from WPI. It's very clear that a civil lawsuit was filed stating that she did. She said she didn't. At this point, if you're still watching, you're probably thinking, Francis, what on earth, what the fuck does this have to do with Judy Mikovits being arrested for exposing the deadly secrets, quote unquote, the deadly secrets of Big Pharma?
For exposing their deadly secrets, the minions of Big Pharma waged war on Dr. Mikovits.
She didn't expose any deadly secrets. She put out a paper. 4 research papers came out afterwards debunking her claim. One came out to say that they'd found a related virus, and then another study came out using the 2 laboratories where she had her initial results, and they found there was no link between XMRV and CFS. They found no XMRV in patients with CFS, and they didn't even find any with people who didn't have CFS. They concluded that XMRV was not present in humans altogether. So what deadly secrets was she exposing? What agreed narrative was there that XMRV wasn't present in humans? There was no narrative. When it came out, plenty of people reported on it. Lots of people were excited. Whatever she found in her initial study was proven without a doubt factually incorrect. Now, this is just my opinion, but it seems like what may have happened is that repeatedly she was disproven by the scientific community. She kept coming back and saying, no, what I've done is right, you're wrong. And then eventually she was completely disproven. She came out and said, yes, okay, I was. It seems like, according to sworn affidavits, she stole documents, refused to give them back, was arrested, the charges were dropped. But at that point, her whole reputation was in tatters. So, my guess would be at that point, you can either find a new career or just hide away, like the documentary suggests that she may have done or could have done. Or you can come out and say, this is the reason I was arrested. It had nothing to do with all those papers that I filed that turned out to be disproven and had to be removed from scientific journals. It's because I exposed the deadly secrets of Big Pharma, which clearly, according to all of the evidence in the world, is not true. So I'm not commenting on her claims she's made about the coronavirus. I'm only commenting on her claims as to why she was arrested. Judy claims to not be an anti-vaxxer, which may or may not be the case, but she has gone to various conferences and spoken to anti-vaccination groups. So it's pretty apparent to me that she's a failed scientist, and now that she can't work in the legitimate scientific community, she's having to go to the pseudo-scientific side and provide them some kind of credibility. because she has a scientific background, she has a PhD, but if she comes out saying that, oh yeah, I was arrested for stealing documents and all of my studies were disproven, that doesn't look good. So she's got to make up some kind of lie about why she was arrested, and that's what it seems like she's trying to do. So as far as that goes, I wouldn't trust a thing she says about coronavirus, because it's pretty clear that she's lied about her history. Some final thoughts. In order to believe Judy, you have to believe that the entire scientific community is lying about what Judy found. It's some big cover-up. What she found was super controversial, which it doesn't seem to be at all. And I wonder, if you believe Judy, what gives her more credibility than the rest of the scientific community? She's just one fucking scientist.